What is up, everybody? My name is Jericholic8704, here to give you another episode of Raw is Jericholic8704. Today we have Raw July 7th, 2003 from Montreal, Quebec, Canada. Let's just dive right into the show. We have a video recap of Kane's misadventures of last week. Everything Kane did had some sort of girl screaming in the background. They showed him unmasking again, because we already seen it a million times. They saw him chokeslamming Bischoff off the stage, and whenever he did, there was just this girl shrieking in the background, really just to drive home that Kane's, a lunatic. So, usually there's an little opening promo about, what happened last week, and then we go right into the theme song. Didn't happen this week. The opening segment, skip the opening pyro, skip the theme song. Austin's music hit, came out to a huge pop. Austin says he was out last week due to food poisoning, and due to the fact that Eric Bischoff had just been killed last week by Kane, it was Austin's show. Austin mentions it felt good watching Bischoff get chokeslammed through the stage. Austin mentions the ref and says there's an IC title match that's going to happen right now. It was refreshing starting this night off with a match, as I've said multiple times. When Raw starts off with a match, it doesn't need to happen every week. But I think if you get, let's just say on average you have 4 Raws a month, 4 or 5. I would say 2 or 3 start with a match. That can be really fun. I mean, starting something with a segment, you can start a Raw with a segment if you have someone who's really popular or you have a really hot angle, but just starting with a match just gets people in the right mood, especially when you have a fan favorite like Booker T come out. So we have an IC title match, Booker T versus Christian. Booker T already comes out to a huge ovation. Christian comes out and gets booed. He gets a promo during his entrance. He says he's better than Booker T and says he's going to bail and lose via countout. Austin says that the title can change hands if there's a DQ or a countout, and Christian says the match is not official until he gets in the ring, and then he starts to walk out, and then Austin says, well, hold on, let's talk this out, Christian. And this is a great moment. Austin knocks the microphone out of Christian's hand. As Christian bends over to pick up the microphone, Austin grabs him and throws him into the ring. So that was a great moment. So Booker starts off hot. Christian ducks out of the ring and slides back in. He cuts Booker off as he gets back in the ring for the heat. Booker T hits a sidewalk slam for a near fall. Booker goes for some those 10 top rope punches, and Christian hot shots him for more heat. Booker flapjacks Christian, goes for a spin-a-rooney, and Christian cuts him off. That was actually a great moment. He was about to do a spin-a-rooney, and Christian just gives him this stiff kick right to the face. It was really funny. Booker T hits a scissors kick, gets a 3, but Christian puts his foot on the rope just in time, so the ref reverses the decision, and the match continues. They go to a commercial break, and when they come back, Christian has a chin lock on Booker T. Booker T powers out, hits a power slam to counter Christian. Booker hotshots Christian and then hits a bookend for a 2. Then he tries a Briscoe roll-up for a 2. And then he hits a missile dropkick for another 2 count. Christian low blows Booker and rolls him up for what seemed like was going to be the pin, especially after all the misadventures that Booker T had to go through to get this IC title match and all the fuck finishes and all the times he got screwed. You'd think this would be the finish. He kicks out at 2. The crowd goes nuts. Christian freaks out. Christian goes for a belt shot. Booker T ducks, hits him in the stomach, and then goes for a scissors kick, hits it, and gets the pin. 2.5 stars. This was a good match. A good way to start the show. The crowd was really into it. Seeing Booker T get the IC title after all the times of getting screwed. Really good moment. It's a babyface done right. You know what I mean? This is how it's supposed to go. The babyface is supposed to chase. Not every babyface has to, but certain babyfaces, their wins are more significant when they were chasing the title after they'd just gotten screwed time and time again. This wasn't like, the biggest ovation I've ever heard. It wasn't like the Daniel Bryan story where, he just was constantly being fucked. And then at WrestleMania, he got his big win. Booker T got his IC title win in the opening match on Raw. But still, the point is, it's the same principle that works every time. The babyface gets fucked constantly, gets screwed over, this and that. Nothing can go right for him, but finally he gets his big win and he celebrates. Then we had a backstage segment with Austin and a newly signed wrestler, Mark Jindrak. Austin and Jindrak are talking about Booker T. The segment is not wired properly. Like, I really could not hear anything they were saying. Booker T's music was still really loud and was over them talking. All I really could make out was Austin was saying like, that could be you someday. And then Jindrak was like, thank you for the opportunity. And I think he said like, thank you for the match with Jericho. And as they're talking, Austin gets called over by a ref, and he's like, hey, something's going on with Dreamer. So we come back, and Spike and Bubba Ray Dudley are freaking out because Tommy Dreamer is bloody and passed out on the ground. So as JR and King, inform the audience on what happened and saying, oh, we're going to take Tommy Dreamer to a medical facility. Is this like a phase where they can't say hospital anymore? Like, they always have to say medical facility. I mean, that means hospital. Like, you have to be an idiot to realize that doesn't. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I always notice that. They never say hospital. They always have to say some sort of code word for it, as if people don't know what they're actually talking about. So they're talking about Tommy Dreamer, who had just been basically killed. Like, he looked like he was dead. He had blood all over his head, and he was passed out. So you'd think, okay, this guy just got annihilated. So what do JR and King talk about? Well, we are in Montreal, Quebec, after all. So now we got to talk about Survivor Series 1997. They show a replay of, the screw job and Bret Hart spitting in Vince McMahon's face. King said he wasn't a Bret Hart fan. I was, a little interesting to hear that. And then they said that Shawn Michaels was going to be on the highlight reel tonight to explain himself. Then we had Rodney Mack, Theodore Long, and Rosey coming out. Teddy Long keeps talking about how the man is holding him down and everything, and he mentions how Jazz never lost her title, but due to her shoulder injury, she had to vacate the title, and he talked about how Nowinski has a concussion. And as Long is talking to Rosey, we're transported backstage to where Dreamer is getting carted away onto an ambulance. Coach comes up and asks Bubba who he thinks did this, and he's like, oh, I got a good idea, and I'm going to go find out who it is right now. So then we come back to the ring, and we see Rosey versus the Hurricane. Hurricane hits some punches, Rosey eventually swats him away and hits a big leg drop. I honestly thought Hurricane was dead because, he had all that weight coming down on him, and Hurricane's like, 6 pounds, and Rosey's like 1,000,000 pounds, so I didn't know how he survived that. Hurricane hits a couple high-flying moves, Bubba, ooh, my notes are wrong there. Rosey hits a Samoan drop for the win. This match lasted like 5 seconds, a quarter of a star. I don't know. I'm just going to throw a rating out there. I don't know. Afterwards, Rosey gets pissed at Long, who I honestly missed this because I really don't know what happened. Long came back into the ring and like he was just like pushing Rosey around, and then eventually Rosey just killed him. Rosey just splashes him in the corner, and then Rodney Mack attacks Rosey, and that was the end of that. Rodney carries Theodore Long out of the ring, who's selling his injury and all that. Then we had a backstage segment with Bubba and Evolution. Bubba confronts Flair and Orton. Austin says if he finds a partner, he can have a tag team match, and then Jackie calls Austin over, saying something had happened to Rico. And again, like most WWE divas, the acting was just fucking awful. Like Jackie comes up to Austin, she's like, Steve, something has happened to Rico, and then they just run away, and it was just horrendous. So during the break, we see Rico, who's he's dangling over one of those little production carts, those little black carts that people would always wheel into each other in those backstage brawls. So he's dangling over them, and this was hilarious. This is a great moment. So Austin is like, Rico, who did this? Who did this to you? And then Rico just he looks up, because Rico is not passed out, unlike Tommy Dreamer. Rico is responding. He is conscious. And Rico he lifts his head and he was like, it was Kane. And then he just goes back down, he just passes out. That was his dying words. And then Jackie's all freaking out, she's in tears and everything. So, horrendous acting, but it was hilarious. Then we had Victoria and Steven Richards versus Gail Kim and Val Venis. So Victoria and Steven Richards are obviously a pair. They came out together, and everyone's just oh, this is their usual shtick. They do their little crazy thing. Then we have Gail Kim come out. She got a pretty good reaction. Gail Kim is Canadian after all. I don't know if they introduced her from Toronto, because I think they usually said she was from Korea. I mean, that might have just been a one-time thing, but I definitely seen maybe it was Unforgiven 03 or Bad Blood 04. I know those are pay-per-views where Gail Kim had a match. And they introduced her as being from Korea, but I really can't, because Gail Kim's from Toronto, as we all know. But I really can't remember if they introduced her as being from Toronto or not. But I'd have to go back and look. But anyway, maybe the crowd knew that, and that's why she got a pretty good reaction. But anyway, speaking of reactions, her tag team partner, Val Venis, got zero reaction. Val Venis did his little shtick. He came out with his towel, and Gail Kim took the towel off for him and all that. But whatever. Victoria and Gail Kim start. Both go back and forth. Gail Kim hits some Hurricane Ranas and monkey flips. Val Venis and Steven Richards step in. Victoria trips Venis, and Richards hits a DDT. King says that he thinks Kane killed both guys, because Kane and JR were kind of getting bored in this match. Nothing was going on. So they just started talking about Kane, and King was like, well, I think it was Kane. And then JR says, well, I don't think it was Kane. And then both me and King at the exact same time went, Why? We both screamed it. Like, why the hell would you not think this is Kane? I have no idea. Usually they make the heel announcer look like an idiot, but here they're making JR. I don't know if they fed JR that line, if they wanted JR to make sure that he didn't know who it was. Maybe they wanted it to be like, oh, well, he's a face, so he's not going to instantly put any blame on anyone. He's not going to instantly accuse anyone without any sort of evidence. And it's going to be the heel that's going to instantly jump to conclusions. But really, you don't have to go that route, because pretty much anyone with a pulse can realize, okay, this guy Kane, he just unmasked. He's a fucking lunatic. He just chokeslammed the general manager off of the stage. Yeah, he's probably going to be the prime suspect when you find two guys who are bloody, battered, and beaten, barely responsive in the case of Rico, but completely unresponsive in the case of Tommy Dreamer. How could you not think this was Kane? So that blew my mind right there. So eventually Victoria tries for a powerbomb. Gail Kim rolls her up for the win. Then we had a backstage segment. The highlight of the show. Hold on. Best moment of the show. Trish and Test. When I say best, I mean the worst. So Test says he's single. Trish is like doing stretches because she has a match tonight with Molly Holly. She's doing like some stretches and some warm-ups. Test is like, hey Trish, I want to let you know I'm single, and you're at the top of my list of people I want to hook up with. And Trish says, no thanks, and Test's reaction is priceless. Test is like, what? Why? Why would you not want to go out with this guy? And like, Test is like, like he's kind of like trying to put the Mac on Trish, and Trish is just like, if there's any indication of how you treated Stacy Keibler, I'm going to say no, thank you. So she starts to walk away. So he grabs Trish by the arm. So that was kind of uncomfortable. Then all of a sudden, Nash comes out of nowhere. Now, we hadn't seen Kevin Nash since Bad Blood 2003. Now, obviously, that's not a bad thing, because it's like, oh, he's selling the injury, it makes sense that he wasn't there. But literally, he came out of nowhere, and I rewatched this segment to know where Nash came from. In the beginning of the segment, you see Nash in the background just kind of sitting in a chair. He's just sitting in a chair watching all of this take place, and then Nash just arises from his chair. When he sees things getting out of hand, Nash is just like, hey, you like picking on women? Why don't you pick on someone bigger than you? And then Test, like, he gets all red, and then he starts shaking. He's like, what? I'll see you in the ring. And then Nash is like, all right, punk, I'll see you there. So that was awesome. Then we had literally the best moment of this Raw. This is not even a joke. We actually have two legit entertaining guys in the ring. The highlight reel with special guest Shawn Michaels. Jericho comes out, says he's Canada's greatest athlete. Jericho says HBK committed the ultimate treason against all Canadians at Survivor Series 1997. Once again, we have to see a replay. By the way, the announcers quickly outed Jericho, saying like, oh, this guy is, in it for himself. He doesn't give a flying fuck about Bret Hart. He just wants, the fan support. We want Bret chants started after all the replays were shown. Jericho outright says, you're not going to get Bret Hart tonight, but at least you have me. HBK comes out and he gets booed. The announcers say that Jericho doesn't care about Bret Hart or the fans. He just cares about, embarrassing Shawn Michaels and all that. HBK says he's happy to address the situation. The fans call him an asshole. HBK says he's never apologized to Montreal, and he says he wants to say he's sorry for all that has happened, and he's the most sorry that they just cannot move on with their lives and accept what happened. HBK says the entire world has gotten over it except Montreal. The crowd chants, you screwed Bret some more, and HBK says, what's your point? Jericho chimes in with one of my favorite Jericho lines, you sanctimonious son of a bitch, which is just, I honestly use that line in the real world. I will call people a sanctimonious son of a bitch. It's a great word, sanctimonious, and it really gets, people buzzing. Great line. HBK says there's plenty of reasons to dislike him. And Shawn Michaels even says, for example, I beat your Canadian hero, Chris Jericho, 4 months ago at WrestleMania. So if you're going to dislike me for anything, dislike me for that. So then we had a great moment, because Jericho just starts going on like, oh, you don't know what you did to us. We have never recovered from the Montreal screw job. We will never get over it. Just we. And then Shawn Michaels eventually says, what is this we stuff? Are you Mr. Canada? And then the crowd fucking erupts. It was such a hilarious line. Jericho just stops and he takes it in for a bit. The crowd goes nuts for Jericho, and then all of a sudden it dies down. And then Shawn Michaels says, well, then why do you live in Florida? So then Jericho kind of has to back out. HBK says, I'll challenge you one-on-one tonight here in Montreal. And Jericho says he will never face Shawn Michaels in Montreal because the Canadian dollar has been devalued over the years, that it would basically be wrestling Shawn Michaels for free. So Jericho says he will face him in 2 weeks in Hollywood. Jericho says he does not wrestle in Montreal, and Jericho tries to get a Hollywood chant going. He's going, Hollywood, Hollywood. And he's trying to get a chant going, and of course, no one goes with it. And then my favorite line of this whole thing, Jericho says in 1997, Vince said Brett screw Brett. In 2003, Jericho says screw Montreal. Fantastic segment. I loved this highlight reel. I loved Jericho's playing of the crowd. I loved Shawn Michaels not giving a fuck about Montreal. This was a great segment, and I loved every second of it. Then we had a backstage segment with Coach and Austin. Coach asks Austin how he will deal with the rampage. Austin says, what rampage? Nothing's going on. He's got it all under control. Austin goes into his office and fiddles with his TV or his fridge or whatever it was. And in the background, you can see that Kane is clearly sitting in his chair because you can see Kane's black towel that he had over his head poking out atop of the, giant wheelie chair, because as we all know, Kane is a fucking giant, so of course you can't mask him under a chair like how evil villains will just be behind the chair because usually they're short enough that the giant wheelie chair can mask them. But Kane, as we know, is 7 feet tall, so you really can't hide that guy. So as Austin's fiddling with whatever he's fiddling with, he turns around and sees Kane, and then Kane tries to do that slow-mo villain turnaround. The problem is Kane kind of fucks it up, and he gets stuck halfway through. So Kane just kind of stares at him for a bit, and he's like, we need to talk. So then there goes to a commercial break, and Austin says he can't believe Kane would want to quit. He says Kane is being a coward, and Austin says he's trying to turn Kane back into the monster that he once was. And Austin says you can either go to the ring tonight or you can quit. Then we had Test versus Kevin Nash. Nash hits his typical move. Test shoves Nash into the post. Test goes to unhook the turnbuckle. Trish comes out to do something. I really don't understand what the point of Trish coming out was. Test grabs Trish and throws her into Nash. Nash, of course, catches her and puts her off to the side so she doesn't get hurt. But in the process of doing so, he gets distracted, and Test hits him with a big boot for the win. However, Lillian did not see that because she said, your winner by pinfall is Test. So she kind of stumbled her words there. And then afterwards, Test trips Trish. Say that 3 times fast. Test trips Trish. Test trips Trish. Test trips Trish. Test trips Trish Stratus and shoves her into the security wall. Then we had a backstage segment. Terry is interviewing Booker T. Nothing. I thought some sort of shenanigans were bound to happen at some point, because the babyface is celebrating his title win and he's all happy and giddy. Booker T says he's finally able to smile, and then he says we're going out a night on a town. He invites Terry out, and they go drinking or whatever the young kids do nowadays. Then we had Chris Jericho versus Mark Jindrak. Mark Jindrak looked generic as ever. He comes out to the most generic theme of all time. They had a very basic Raw match, nothing really exciting. You could have swapped this out with any other 2 guys and they could have had the exact same match. Nothing wrong with it, but then again, nothing exciting. I'll give it a 1.5 stars just out of respect. It was a perfectly fine match, nothing wrong with it. They didn't fuck up or anything. Jericho beat Jindrak eventually. Jericho tapped him out to the walls. And afterwards, Jericho says HBK will submit in Hollywood. And after the break, they showed a match graphic for Heat and showed Triple H versus Maven, and I do not remember this at all. I do not remember Triple H wrestling on Sunday Night Heat against Maven. Speaking of Triple H, he was not on this show. I don't know when he had that groin injury, so maybe it was around here, but I really don't know if that's the case because he wore those biker shorts to protect that groin injury around late August, early September, around that time. So I don't know what was going on there. Molly Holly versus Trish Stratus. The winner goes on to face Gail Kim next week on Raw for the women's title. Trish is selling her injuries during the entrance. Molly cheap shots Trish as she's getting into the ring and posing for the crowd. She works over her neck, which is still hurting from when Tess threw her into the security wall. Trish tries to make a comeback with some roll-ups and whatnot. Molly hits a shoulder breaker and then an inverted camel clutch. To win the match, Molly Holly will face Gail Kim next week on Raw for the women's title. Then we had a backstage segment with Stone Cold Steve Austin. Austin is watching TV. He turns around to see Kane. Austin sold being scared in hilarious fashion. He basically was just watching TV, just watching Raw. He turned around, he saw Kane, and he just fucking jumped. It was Flair level. He was just flailing around, and then Kane said, I want to go. So basically, Kane is agreeing to go out with Austin. Then we had Flair and Orton versus Bubba Ray Dudley and Rob Van Dam. Another week, another Evolution entrance with this generic-ass theme. RVD and Orton started off. Flair distracts Rob Van Dam, and Orton hits him with his patented backbreaker. Of course, it wasn't as powerful as it once was. And when I say that, I mean, the announcers didn't make that big of a deal of it. King did note that it's a pretty cool move, and I will say that is a very cool move. I always have liked that the backbreaker from Orton. It's very, unorthodox, very, very exclusive to Randy Orton, for a lack of a better word. But no, I definitely a cool move. I always liked it. Flair gets the heat on Rob Van Dam after he gets tagged in. Bubba gets the hot tag and double teams them both. When I say hot tag, I'm actually using that term very politely because there was no heat for this match at all. When Bubba tagged in, no one stood up, no one cheered. Everyone was just kind of watching the match, kind of wanting the show to be over. RVD goes for a 5-star, and Orton tries to shake him up, and then Spike Dudley comes down and beats up Orton. RVD hits the frog splash on Flair, who starts flopping around, and eventually RVD gets the 3-count pinfall. So then Kane is shown coming towards the ring, and he pushes the cameraman down. That was a funny moment. And then we had a main event promo. Austin says the fans can do whatever they want, but Kane better come out right now. Kane's music hits, and the fans cheer. They're going crazy for him. Everyone chants Kane. Austin says it's not a beauty contest, and all the fans want to see is Kane kicking ass. And Austin shows a clip of last week where Kane killed Bischoff. Austin said, that's the Kane I want to see. It was hilarious watching Bischoff fall, and you know what? It was pretty funny. And Kane says, you think I'm funny? And then Kane says, are you going to make fun of me? And then Kane starts beating up Stone Cold. Stone Cold fights back. I mean, he actually gets a lot of offense on Kane. He hits Kane in the head with a chair, and Kane gets busted open. Kane starts bleeding, and then he gets stunned. And then Kane sits up and chokeslams Stone Cold Steve Austin. And that's it. That's how the show ended. He chokeslammed. I don't even think he set off any pyro or anything. It was a bloody Kane. And, he tried to celebrate with some beers, and then Kane instantly sat up and then hit a chokeslam. And that was it. There was no big reveal. Like, nothing was going to happen next week or anything. Just completely flat ending to Raw. So that was Raw. I don't know how wonderful that was, but it seemed like a pretty average Raw. I can't even say average, because really nothing happened on this show. No one really cared. Hell, the world champion wasn't even on this show. And there really, as far as I'm concerned, there really wasn't any sort of acknowledgement why. So I'll see you all later, and hopefully next week we'll have a better Raw after this string of 2 pretty mediocre Raws. So I'll see all of you later.